The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio. Welcome to the Connected Table Live. We're your hosts, Melanie Young and David Ransom, your insatiably curious culinary couple. We enjoy traveling the world, exploring wine, food, hospitality, and the life we believe everyone should live, which is to eat well, drink well, and support people in the hospitality business because it's a great business to be in, as we are. We travel frequently to Italy and recently had the great opportunity to attend a program called Campania Stories that really tells the stories of the producers and regions of the beautiful region of Campania in southern Italy, which has rich, rich history. We've been to Campania a few times, right, David?
We've been a number of times, yes.
So today, many people go to Campania to go to the coast because the Amalfi Coast is just gorgeous and you want to see the sea. But we're taking you inland to an incredibly historic area. It is filled with mountains and it's very green. And some of our favorite wines are produced there, right, David?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to take you to an area called Avellino. It's a province in Campania, to the region called Tufo. This is where the famous Greco di Tufo DOCG white wine is produced. And we have with us Ferrante di Somma of Cantine di Marzo, which is the oldest winery we've learned in southern Italy, with a great history. And his ancestor, Scipione di Marzo, brought Tufo Greco cuttings, from the coast of Napoli to Tufo, where he planted them. And he's basically, the patriarch of Greco di Tufo wines. We're going to learn a little bit more about this history and talk about our recent visit to Campania and to Cantine di Marzo with Ferrante di Somma. Welcome to the Connected Table.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. And we had a lovely visit at your winery a couple of weeks ago. Ferrante, why don't you give us a little backstory on the history of your family and how they came to be in Tufo and working with wine and growing grapes?
Okay, a few words. First of all, family. Let's define that, because my surname is Di Somma. The Di Somma side is a very ancient family. We date back to the 13th century Neapolitan family. However, my grandmother on my father's side was a Di Marzo. Classical thing. It was a marriage of title and money, which happened. My grandmother married in 1920, and that's how we entered the Di Marzo family. That's how I ended up with part of the shares. The rest was basically acquired and gradually getting a larger and larger share of the winery. So the Di Marzo family, well, the first known ancestor, Scipione di Marzo, we believe he left, actually it wasn't really the coast, he was near Nola. Nola is a town which is halfway between Naples and Avellino, on the flanks of the Vesuvio. And he fled in 1647, 1648. He fled an epidemic of plague, and he came to Tufo. And, the story is that he brought this white variety which he planted in Tufo. So this white variety, to go a bit more in depth, the Greco variety, it's very difficult to prove the exact origins. I can give you explanations which are very plausible. First of all, the Greco grape they first started talking of a Greco wine around the 10th century, because this area of Irpinia is the province of Avellino, basically, in a nutshell. Irpinia was under Lombard domination. The Lombards were Germanic tribes that actually originally Scandinavian tribes, which traveled to Germany and in the 7th century entered Italy and occupied practically all of Italy. So we were a country of under Lombard domination. However, the coast of Naples, Sorrento was under Byzantine, was a Byzantine duchy. Naples was a Byzantine duchy. And for us, they were the Greeks, because the Byzantine Empire were considered Greek, basically, by the Western Empire. And so for us, they were the Greeks. And on the coast, they used to grow more white varieties. And they made this wine they made a special wine, which they started calling Vino Greco. And this wine consisted in letting the clusters wither on the plant, on the vine. And they would make a very high alcohol wine, which reached 18%. This was very important in a time where sulfites did not exist, because this was a wine that could be kept. Bear in mind that medieval wine, first of all, it was probably not very, very pleasant, and also was wine that didn't keep because they didn't have sulfites. We can say the most horrible things about sulfites, but sulfites help to keep a wine stable. Sulfites are used also in the food industry. They're very, very widespread. The important thing is to limit as much as possible the amount. So these wines without sulfites had a high alcohol content, a high acidity. It was a wine that was exported all the way to Constantinople, to France. And it was an expensive wine because very low yield, because of the withered grapes. And throughout the following centuries, they first of all in Campania they started growing more and more white varieties, and they kept this name Vino Greco because it allowed you to keep a higher price because it was considered a prestigious wine. If you look at the important documents are basically the registries of the medieval monasteries in Campania, because monks used to produce and also deal a lot in wine. And you see that they start using this term Vino Greco. By the Middle Ages, the distinction was quite clear. Vino Greco was white wine, Vino Latino was red wine. That was a distinction. Let me go forward in time to the 16th century. We have very interesting writings by Sant'Elancerio. Sant'Elancerio was the bottler. He was of the Pope. Basically, he was in charge of all the wine of the Pope. And that was a big deal at the time. Yeah. And Sant'Elancerio says that every day His Holiness drinks a glass of Vino Greco. And not only every day, he rinses his eyes and his manly parts with this wine. Don't ask me why. I have no explanation for that.
No.
But Sant'Elancerio writes about different types of Greco. He talks of the Greco del Vesuvio, Greco di Posillipo, Greco di Ischia, Greco di Torre, and Greco di Nola. So you see, it's a quite widespread term. He talks of wines because at the time they didn't classify grapes. Brings us to what we should pay attention to, the fact is the Greco di Nola, because San Paolo Belsito, the hometown of Scipione di Marzo, is practically attached to Nola. So it's very likely and plausible that Scipione di Marzo brought the Greco di Nola to Tufo in the 17th century. Also because you must know that the 17th century was a pretty bad century for Campania, because we had an eruption of the Vesuvio in 1620. We had a mega earthquake in 1688. We had various outbreaks of plague. Well, they say plague, it could be smallpox, cholera, whatever. At the time, they didn't really, basically people died. And so there was a lot of inside migration, and a lot of the grape varieties in Campania traveled around and were distributed throughout the territory, especially in that century. So it's very plausible that Scipione di Marzo brought the Greco di Nola, which he planted in Tufo, where it found a specific soil.
Let's talk about that soil, because Tufo is a type of soil as well. So why did it flourish there, and what characteristics does it now give to this specific Greco di Tufo?
Okay, so for this, I have to go back 15 million years, but don't worry, I'll go faster.
That's okay.
Okay, 15 million years ago, instead of Italy, we had the sea, a shallow sea. And that's a period when the Apennines start to emerge from the sea, and southern Italy becomes an archipelago of islands. Following that, there's a phenomenon of erosion. You have to imagine these hills, these mountains popping out of the sea, and there's a phenomenon of erosion which brings sediments and on the sea bottom. I go fast forward to 5.96 million years ago, the Great Saline Crisis. What happened at that time? The African continental plate decided to go upwards and closed what was the equivalent of the Strait of Gibraltar at the time, and the Mediterranean becomes a closed sea. And in a very, very short time, it evaporates. And you end up having a land that probably must have looked like Utah because there's a lot of salt and the calcium carbonates, chalk, magnesium carbonates, and brimstone, sulfur. Sulfur was caused by certain bacteria during the evaporation, which extracted the sulfur from the minerals, from the soil. So there were important deposits of sulfur, as you've seen visiting the winery, that we had a mine of sulfur in the 19th century in the family, 19th and 20th century. So this is one phase, after which the continental plate, after about, what was it, about 5.3 million years ago, goes down again. The Strait of Gibraltar opens up, and it's really like opening a water tap. The Atlantic Ocean comes gushing in, and it's believed that it took just between 6 months to 2 years to fill up the Mediterranean again, which is a very geologically traumatic event. It's a really, in geological terms, it's a flash flood. And so we're back to the archipelago of islands. After that, except that on the sea bottom, we have the sediments and we have the carbonates. After that, gradually the global climate cools down, the sea level goes down, Italy emerges. But we're not finished yet, because 40,000 years ago, there was this massive mega eruption of the Campi Flegrei, the Phlegraean fields, which is just north of Naples. Now it used to be a volcano. Now it's just a big caldera, which is giving us quite a few problems now because it's getting active again. Well, this eruption, you have to imagine this massive pyroclastic cloud, which goes over the Apennines, goes inland, covers the whole area. Actually, the plume went all the way to Siberia. That's from the air. From land, we had rivers of lava, which came and covered the soil. And where it encountered fresh water, let's say ponds, or wherever there was fresh water, the contact between this volcanic material and the water, alkaline water, gave what you call zeolites, which is a sort of a semi-porous clay, which functions a bit as a sponge. It absorbs and releases humidity. But you don't have it everywhere. You have it in certain spots. After which, we had another eruption of the Phlegraean fields about 10,000 years ago. And we got, again, whole deposits of volcanic material. And then we had the various eruptions of the Vesuvio throughout the centuries, which brought some pumice stone in certain areas, some ashes in other areas. So you see, we have a very, very diversified geological structure, which is the reason why I vinify separately each vineyard. I have a very Burgundy style approach, because like in Burgundy, each plot of land has its own geological structure, and each plot gives wines with its specific characteristics.
I think that's a great, really fascinating. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, how come it happened millennia ago, and are we going to have this happen again? Because we're seeing eruptions. I mean, Etna recently erupted in Sicily, and the Phlegraean fields are kind of rumbling now. You never know when we're going to have more climatic excitement other than what we already are experiencing. Now, we visited your key Clue vineyards.
Yes.
Why don't we talk about, because they're very distinctive, each one. And just for everybody listening, this is an area, you were inland. When you refer to the Phlegraean fields in Napoli, that's almost 3 hours, 2.5 hours away, right?
No, actually, it's about an hour, 1.5 hours.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
about
the drive felt that way, but but it's
Well, there's
you're,
that.
you're inland and you look around and you can see the Apennine in the background and the hills, so it's quite hilly. Let's talk about because we tasted many of your wines, but let's talk about how this translates into the wines themselves and what is produced at Cantine di Marzo. But before we do that, let's just again underscore that your family's winery is considered the oldest in Campania, right?
Yes.
And one of the oldest in Italy, correct?
Probably. Well, in Tuscany, you have, I don't know, Giovanni
Yeah.
di Campi, his winery, I think, is 1,000 years old. I'm only 400 years old compared to him.
Okay, you're a baby. Well, but a significant history, and again, it's considered the birthplace of Greco di Tufo. So let's talk about your different Cru vineyards and how they are distinct in terms of topography and the wines produced.
Okay, so let's consider. First of all this has been the result of extensive studies done by geologists, because Vincenzo Mercurio, our winemaker, has a brother, Mariano, who teaches geology at the University of Benevento. And one of his students decided to do a thesis, The Influence of Soil on the Production of Wine. And they gave us the honor of being their, let's say, their guinea pig or their case study. So we had the geologists who came over and we started digging in each vineyard. We took some samples of soil, samples of grapes. We've analyzed the soil to see what's in there. We've analyzed the grapes throughout 4 different vintages, and we did a panel of tastings. We have to come out with a little leaflet so that it's comprehensible, because if you look at the study, it's pretty tough to understand. It's all mathematical functions. I didn't understand much. I understood the maps though. So what I did see is that there's basically the 3 main components of our soil are clay, carbonates, and zeolites. These are the 3 things, and each vineyard has different proportions of one or the other. And what I can say, so if we take the different crus, for example, the Vigna Serrone is the one that is most complete with the 3 things. It's packed with zeolites, it's packed with clay, and it's packed with carbonates. And that wine is much more on the muscle. It's much more on the power end of things. We have Laure, for example, much more academic, much more Greco by the book, which is basically, it's just clay and carbonates, no zeolites. We have the Mulino Giardino, which is very prone to aging, very rich in zeolites, and quite rich in clay. And we have the Ortale, which is very poor in zeolites, rich in clay, and relatively rich in carbonates too.
And that results in wines with very distinctive aromas and flavors. Let's just talk about, for our listeners and viewers, what distinguishes the aromas and flavors and the personality, as we say, of Greco di Tufo. And we always also like to say it's similar to, or if you like this, because we deal with a lot of Chardonnay drinkers in the United States, and we're always trying to say, let's try something else. So let's put it into context in terms of what you expect in your mouth.
Okay. First of all, I know it's not fashionable anymore to talk of minerality, at least in Italy. They're sort of doing this thing, minerality doesn't exist. I believe it does exist.
Oh, we love minerality.
It does.
Oh, we love it. Yeah. And acidity.
Well, they prefer to talk of flinty rather than, okay, let's forget about the polemics. It is a very mineral wine. It's supposed to be very mineral. It's a very savory wine, practically salty. It's a high acidity wine. Do not expect a typical wine of a very, very hot country. We are much more in the style, much more towards Trentino Alto Adige, if not even Alsace. If we were to be put in a category, I would put us in the category of the Rieslings. Something between a Riesling and a Chablis.
I think that's an interesting context to put it into, because when we went to Irpinia is inland, yes, and and it's kind of in the rain shadow of the first set of mountains after Vesuvius. So it's a humid region, and it's a green region, as opposed to the coastal areas, which are very hot and dry and struggle. But this is actually a very fertile region, and so the grapes really present differently by being grown there.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. The climate is very unpleasant for people, at least in winter. Very rainy. I have memories of my childhood when we went to the villa in Avellino. We didn't have heating yet, and getting into the bed where you had these practically damp bed sheets, but very good for wine. It gives those crisp wines, and you're absolutely right. We're in the middle of the Apennines. The Apennines, well, I wouldn't say protect us, but prevent the air from the sea from reaching the inside. So this mitigating effect of the sea climate, where it's more continental, rainy. They say La Irpinia, and much colder. Where in winter sometimes we reach like 8-9 degrees Celsius. I don't remember what that is in Fahrenheit. Difference between Naples. So it's what 8-9 degrees Celsius would be something like 30 degrees Fahrenheit, more or less.
Yeah, that's cold.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
So it's colder.
And you do get snow there.
Oh, we get snow here. Yes.
Yeah.
Not in these last years, but so we do get.
Right.
And when it snows heavily.
Looking at our respective notes, which are looking down, I see minerality comes up in both of our notes, sapidity, floral characteristics, which adds to the Riesling and aspect, and also just that flinty stoniness as well.
And also herbal.
Yes.
Vegetation. A lot of vegetation, like Iranian bush, these kinds of aromas. And I had this epiphany recently when I was doing the tasting with the sommeliers of the ice for our study on the geology and all that. And while I was tasting, I was thinking, my God, this is not minerality. This is herbs. This is wild vegetation. It just came to flash.
It's got that in Provence, the garrigue.
The garrigue.
The garrigue
Exactly.
characteristic
I call it
to
scrub. And I have in every single one of my notes here, scrub, Mediterranean, herbally. And it, often when I taste wines, I don't know about you, David, but I always look around when we're in the vineyards. I look at all the plants and the scrub and the natural wildflowers, because those impart into the wine, particularly that garrigue, as they call it. It's we just so we had we brought 2 bottles back, and we had the Vigna Lore the other night with a beautiful pompano, and it was we seared the pompano fish. It's a Gulf fish. It's a white fish, and we had it with I forgot, you made it, David. What did you make it with?
Well, it was
fennel.
It was with onions, fennel, garlic, and crab meat over the top.
The pairing was spectacular. One of our guests was a chef, and he said this is just the most perfect pairing.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, it just blew everybody away. We also, 2 other things we want to touch on, and then a little more family history. We understand you're also a first in bringing Metodo Classico wines to the area. Is that true?
That's true. The first time we did a Metodo Classico in 1926, because what was the situation at the time? Southern Italy was selling a lot of bulk wine to France, because France was hit by phylloxera in 1875, where you had these French wine growers that brought some vines from the US that were infected with phylloxera. And as we all know, it destroyed about 90% of all vineyards in the world, basically. And phylloxera arrived much later here. It arrived only around the 1920s, 30s, when they had already discovered the graft system. So for all those years before they started using the graft system, you see those sad, pathetic attempts of French wine growers. You see those old tools where they were trying to spray sulfur smoke inside the soil to stop the phylloxera. Bear in mind that at the time, average consumption in France was about 150 liters per inhabitant per year, which is massive. Nowadays in France, they're below 50. In Italy, they're just below 40. To give you an example, I think Washington, D.C., which is the highest wine consumer in the U.S., the average consumption per inhabitant is around 14 liters.
So we didn't know that. Washington, D.C. That's
Yep.
kind of surprising to me. But
All those congressional parties.
I guess people really all those parties.
And so people used to drink a lot of wine. They used to drink a lot of plonk with it. I mean, it wasn't very high quality wine, but it was part of the nutritional sphere. The worker would stop for lunch, would pull out a huge sandwich, a liter of red or white, and that would make his day. Nowadays, people drink much less. They drink much better, but they drink less.
Well,
So
a lot of that also was way back then. Water was not safe to drink.
Well, I mean, in the 19th century, by then, the water was pretty safe.
Oh, it was? Okay.
But you can't interrupt good
Old
habits.
die hard.
Yeah.
Exactly, especially in France in that case. And so you had to feed this market. And we had our director, his name was Fiore Bottiglieri, which sounds like a joke in Italian because Bottiglieri sounds like bottle. For a man who manages a winery, it's a perfect surname. And Fiore Bottiglieri developed contact with the French. First of all, he brought the Guyot pruning system here in Irpinia. Mm-hmm. Because before, our peasants used to grow the vines with a system of raggiera, where you have two vines that cross over on the top, a pergola, because that would allow to plant veggies in between. And so he brought the Guyot, much more systematic, higher quality, lower yield. And also he developed contact with the French. He worked with us from 1919 until 1958. And so he developed this contact with the French, and he saw that our bulk wine was being used also for cuts of champagne. So that's how he had the idea, let's make our own sparkling wine, which came out under the name Torre Favale in 1926. So next year we have the centennial, and we're coming out with our 48 months Anni Venti sparkling.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know we had something called the 1930.
Yes, 1930, which is a younger version dedicated to my dad, who left us in 2019, and I had to process my morning through making wine dedicated to him, because he really kept the winery alive, barely alive, but he kept it alive when in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, and so I wanted to do that for him. So this one is 18 months on lease. It's a Brut Nature, while the Anni Venti is 48 months and an Extra Brut.
We liked it a lot. We had like nice acidity. I love Brut Nature wines. They tend to be, actually, we had a recent interview with another winery, Villa Franciacorta, and they were saying that more of their customers are drinking Brut Nature. It's growing in popularity because people want lower or no dosage. We'll talk a little bit about your family and the process, but we do want to bring up another one we tasted that we also brought back that you're experimenting in amphora with. Talk to us about this, because there's a wonderful backstory to it with your family.
Which wine? Are you talking of the Didymos?
The Didymos, yes.
Yeah, which is named, it's the cousins, or there's two sisters or something.
No, they're my two little twins. I'm a very late dad. I have two 6-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, and I wanted to dedicate a wine to them. And this is the wine that is vinified, macerated, and aged in amphora, in this big clay amphora of 600 liters. We were a bit of victim of our success because we only have 350 bottles left. It just went out just in a flash. And but we have 2022 that's coming up next year. So, and I'm planning on increasing the quantities. So this is I call it my Neolithic wine because it's very, very simple. The grapes arrive, grapes from Vigna Laure. We just put them in the amphora, pressed it, let it macerate for a month, racked it. We put the wine back on lease for a year, and then about 2 years in the bottle. Because another feature that we haven't talked about, the aging potential of the Greco, which is massive. I'm really talking, this is wine that can last 20, 30 years, and it just becomes better and better. Just like, that's why I was saying we're in the category of the Rieslings, because these are wines that develop these tertiary notes, hydrocarbons, but mixed with dried fruits. It really becomes a symphony of of aromas.
I wish we had tasted more aged Grecos. We really didn't this trip.
Well, it was all about the new.
It was all about the new releases. That's why.
And everybody's running all the time. Quick, quick, here, there, up, down. You should come over and just chill, and we can take
slow tourism. So Didionus means twin. Yeah, Didynos. It means twin. In my notes,
Emma's Mary.
It's a beautiful wine. I got notes of saffron and orange peel and lemon. It just musky. I loved it. I love this wine, and I can see where it would have a lot of appeal right now. Yeah. And then you're going to create another version for the other twin, right?
Yes, I have to do also a red one. That's a work in progress. We just got the second, and we have to work on it. Anyways, well, it's not going to come out before about 3 years, if not 4. So we have time for that. The reason why I did this Didymos, the way I see it now, when I tasted it, it's that we opened the door on a whole new dimension of the Greco di Tufo, whole new direction, a completely different world of aromas. Here we're much more on we're on the verge of mentholated notes. I don't know whether you've noticed. Ultra balsamic, really medicinal herbs. That's why I wanted to age it 1 extra year. All the winery were after me, telling me, we got to release it. I said, not yet. We waited an extra year so that the palettes of aromas sort of blended better together.
It's beautiful wine.
It was a lovely wine.
We brought some back.
We did bring a bottle back with us. Thank you. I think now you have 349 bottles left. But we're very excited that we were able to bring some back with us. You touched on red a minute ago, and Irpinia, where the winery is located, on a large scale, is Aglianico country in a big way. Terraces there, etc. But you actually grow the only Aglianico in Tufo.
I did the only one. I'm one of the really crazy ones to have still vineyards here, because it's a lot of work to manage. I mean, I'm happy with the quality. It's just that it's a lot of work to fight against potential rot and things like that. So we have to be very careful in the pruning. And now we're changing the pruning so that we have the cluster that falls a bit more, because before it was basically sitting on its bum, and there was a risk of rots at the bottom of the cluster. So we've changed the pruning so that it falls more, it's more ventilated. The problem with Aglianico is it's got a very thin skin, and it's very prone to rot. Mm-hmm. So
And you're in tight hills as well.
Yeah.
In Tufo, in your particular region, I noticed it was steep and they were close together. So there's there's less air movement, I would think, than there would be in a more wide open space. So that doesn't help.
Yes. And yet it does better in other parts of Avellino. Mm-hmm. It just because we traveled around tasting, and it's a beautiful red grape and red wine. That's interesting about it not flourishing as well.
There's a reason why they grow Aglianico mostly around Taurasi and these other villages.
Right.
It's more open, it's more ventilated, it's cooler, so the grapes stay drier.
It's strange. Avellino it's bigger than we recalled.
You should talk of Irpinia. Avellino is just the capital of Irpinia.
Okay, so it's Irpinia. Okay.
Which corresponds more or less to the province of Avellino.
It's confusing on the maps, I'll be honest with you.
We just have to spend more time there, then we'll figure it out.
Irpinia, and there's amazing producers there. I mean, I think this was for me my second or third visit, but we missed the Campania stories that was centered in Irpinia, which was unfortunate because it would have been wonderful. It's, is it well touristed? I know people can visit Cantine di Marzo. Do you get a lot of visitors?
We get a lot of American visitors. Thank God. Mm-hmm. They're my favorite.
Oh, good. Well, that's
because
good.
Very polite, very interested. They love drinking, and they always buy wine. So I'm happy.
So Tufo is Greco di Tufo is the wine, but Tufo is its own village. And your family had an incredible impact on how this historic village evolved. You touched on briefly the sulfur mines, but
Yes.
it was your family's discovery. I think Donato discovered on horseback discovered the sulfur mines. Talk to us about that.
Francesco discovered the mines. Donato brought the railroad. So 1866, Francesco di Marzo, while he was riding on his land near the River Sabato, he saw some shepherds that had made a bonfire, and he noticed that in the bonfire they were burning stones. From the smell, he understood that they were burning pieces of brimstone. He understood that his land was very rich with this mineral. And so he started this mining activity, which lasted more than 100 years, from 1866 until 1984, because the mine ran out, and then they discovered you could obtain liquid sulfur as a byproduct of oil refining, so a fraction of the cost. But through all the 19th century, it was a very big deal. Sulfur was very important for gunpowder, for matches, for agriculture. And so that made pretty much, well, let's say it improved the fortune of the Di Marzo, who were pretty well off before that. But then before that, they made their wealth basically through interesting marriages, let's say.
That's very commonly. But what was we toured the old sulfur mine,
Yes.
And there's a monument to, I guess, Donato, or is it to Scipione?
To Francesco.
To Francesco, and it's still there. And the old railroad, because you built the railroad, it was an important rail site.
That's
you think
Donato.
about, and at some point I read that the company employed 500 people, so it was an important economic impact on the village of Tufo.
We even reached 600 people, with indirect employees like brick laborers and all that. We reached 800.
Amazing.
At its peak, Tufo had 3,000 inhabitants. Now, Tufo has barely 800.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe they need to start selling off houses cheaply to get people to invest.
They're dirt cheap. So if you have some American buy here, I can tell you can buy a house for 10,000 euros.
Yeah, so that's what they're doing. Well, it's a shame that it all died. There was this amazing prosperity, and then it all kind of went away because of changes in sourcing. Because sulfur is also, it's so important for so many things. The palace, Castello Palace that we visited, what was that historically before it became, and let's talk about the amazing network of underground cellars in it. And this is where we did our tasting.
So the Palazzo di Marzo originally was part of the fortifications. Pasquale di Marzo, at the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, he let's say he gentrified this military structure because he had this very good idea of getting married, becoming a widower, and getting remarried. So it's a double dowry, which is very interesting. And we found because we have loads of old documents, 18th, 19th century, and we saw that Pasquale di Marzo started purchasing at the very beginning of the 19th century. He started buying land like mad. He started investing a lot. He really increased the patrimony of the family. And then came in 1866 the mine, which added an extra income to the family. All this until, let's say, things started going downhill after the Second World War. First of all, because it was not the branch, because before that, business was managed mostly by my great-grandfather Vito Di Marzo, who was very, very capable in business. Then when he died in 1943, it passed over to the other branch of Marino Di Marzo, who was not as good as an entrepreneur as his cousin. And so things started going downhill. Plus, you add to that the Di Marzo were very fertile and prolific. So very often you have 10, 12 children. And unfortunately, we have Napoleonic law where things have to be divided among all the children. So the property started being more and more fragmented. And we reached a point at a certain moment when we had the winery. There were 40 owners. Nothing could be done. So my life's work was rebuild the equities so as to concentrate them in a larger chunk, so that somebody could make the right or the wrong decisions, but at least making the decisions.
So you took it upon yourself to actually consolidate and take over management and ownership of it.
Yes.
No.
And you have quite an international business background. I mean, you've lived just a little bit about you. You've lived in England and France and Russia. Talk to us about your background and what were you doing all that time?
Well, in England, I arrived in England in 1969, and I was 4, and I lived there for 7 years. After that, we moved to Paris, where I lived there for about 20 years or something, until 1992. 1992, I decided I wanted to go and live in Russia. I wanted to see the world, adventure and all that. I wanted to see the changing world. So I learned Russian and I went to live there, and I stayed there for 5 years.
Wow.
And after that, in a nutshell, I'll give it short. I've been working and traveling between Paris, Milan, and Moscow. I had a business in outdoor advertising, a whole different thing. And in 2003, I decided I did a master's degree in Burgundy in wine trade. And because I knew I was going to take over the winery sooner or later.
Sure.
In the meantime, while the situation was maturing, I worked as a wine agent, specialized on the Russian market for 7 years. And I sold a lot of French and Italian wines there. And then I took over here. I closed Paris. I closed my flat in Paris on the 1st of November 2009 and came to live in Naples and Avellino.
What a background. And you know, I can only imagine what it would be like to live in Russia. I mean, we can't go there really. So it must have been an incredible experience. Incredible experience. So you have a great responsibility now. Where are you taking it? What is your vision?
My vision, first of all, was to shift our winery, because when I took over, we were basically selling only in the winery and in a chain of retail stores of supermarkets in northern Italy. Very low cost. And I have to say that when I took over the winery, our wine had become, I'd even say, embarrassing.
Where do you? Oh, well, he just disappeared, but we are waiting to hear from Ferrante di Somma again from Cantine di Marzo. And here he comes back, I think. We're talking with Ferrante di Somma of Cantine di Marzo. This is a place you can visit.
It is.
And we highly recommend.
And it's a beautiful area. It's not too far from, as we said, Naples. It's about an hour away.
Right.
And
you need a car. Easy
to get to.
Yeah, I think you can arrange tours as well. Yeah. But it's a very small village. I think the highlight really is going to Cantine di Marzo. But there's so many fantastic wineries in Irpinia, and the wines. I mean, you touched on Taurasi, which is a whole nother topic from where we are here with Cantine di Marzo, but just beautiful red wines. I think that was like my eye opener when we were there this past trip. It was really quite fantastic.
And also you're in the home in Tufo. You're actually in the home of Greco di Tufo.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a bucket list thing for a lot of people who love white wines, especially the white wines of Campania.
I think
to be able to go and experience that.
Well, and we didn't touch on it because it's not this topic, but this area also is known for the Fiano d'Avellino, which is another topic for another time, but another phenomenal white wine produced in Irpinia, which is the region we're talking about, which is inland. I'm hoping we can get Ferrante back. I see his screen flickering a bit, so we'll see. But in the meantime, just a little bit about, why don't we just briefly touch about Campania Stories is a wonderful program. It's been going on for several years with the Regione Campania and several organizers, including Myriad Partners. And what they do is they bring journalists over to Campania and they showcase one area where we're all based. We were actually in Ercolano in the Vesuvio area where we had visited and spent a lot of time a few years back. And then we have the option of touring and visiting wineries throughout Campania. Ferrante touched on the Flagrant Fields, which I know there was a field trip there, and they are kind of rumbling right now with volcanic activity. We chose Irpinia because we had missed the Campania Stories program that focused on Irpinia, and we wanted to go back in and do a little deep dive. And I think we saw maybe 4 or 5 wineries when we were there. Every year it changes, and we're so grateful to be able to go to Campania Stories because it is such a fascinating region. Many people just go and fly into Naples and eat the pizza and have the food and go down to the Amalfi Coast, but there's so much more to see. I mean, you've got Pompeii, you've got Vesuvio, you have the Flagrant Fields, you have Caserta, you have Irpinia, and they're all different. And the wines are all different in the areas. They're very unique. I don't know if we're going to get Ferrante back. So what we may have to do is just wrap up.
Can you hear me?
Oh, he's back.
He's back.
Oh,
I don't know
well,
what
welcome
happened.
back.
Well, I know what happened. Somebody's pestering me with WhatsApps and things like that, and I think it
Not me.
interrupted. No.
Well,
but
while we lost you, we were just talking about how
I heard you.
wonderful-
I could hear you, but you couldn't hear
Okay.
me.
Oh, good. Well, we have a little bit of time left. You were going to just talk about the vision. I think we'd like to just talk about, the vision of Cantine di Marzo to the future. And also, again, we want people to visit the region and experience it. So how can they do that?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to a message to all of you. Are you tired of Pinot Grigio?
Thank you.
Well, I've been saying for years, Ferrante, that there's two regions that make the best white wines in Italy, and that's Northeast and Southwest.
Yeah.
And
I
when I
concur.
speak of Southwest, I'm talking about Campania.
Yeah,
Yes.
just phenomenal. You probably heard us waxing poetic about the Fiano d'Avellino's,
Yes.
and we didn't mention the Falangina. Really, the eye-opening white wines. Although this trip, I did taste some terrasses that made me go, whoa, got to take another look there. And then, as David referenced, the Northeast, we love the wines of Friuli, just in Colli, that whole area. Colli, just fabulous. So anyway, you said if you're sick of Pinot Grigio, try Greco di Tufo, okay, and
what?
and how can our fans and followers book a visit? And where do they stay? Do you offer accommodations, or do you have to stay elsewhere? What would you propose, and how would you visit the winery?
No, I would propose, first of all, okay, you land in Naples, or you can also land in Salerno, because Salerno maybe is even closer. You need a car, though. That's the only thing, because unfortunately here we have I don't have to, the infrastructures here are still pretty much from knuckle draggers. And so it's unless you can take a bus to Avellino, but then from Avellino to Tufo is a nightmare. So you need a car. Unless you call me, because I live in Naples, so I come here every day, so I can always catch somebody and bring him over. And you just need to warn us a couple of days in advance, sending an email, and we're very happy to show you around the winery. We have different formulas of visits according to how many wines you want to taste, how much you want to visit. I do personally the English visits. If I really can't, then there's Eleonora, who speaks very good English.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that difficult. I mean, and it's nice because you're really very much off the beaten tracks of tourism.
It is really off the beaten track and well worth it. And the underground cellars are just so historic and beautiful. And this giant palazzo, which is where you now do the tasting. It's not a lived-in palazzo anymore. It's a historic place where, and a big centerpiece of the village.
Yes, and my headache and my nightmare, because I really have to do something with it, but I need a few million euros to restructure it.
Yeah, it's really large,
It's big.
but you're actually still making the wine in the cellars there.
Yes.
So that's it's one of the wineries what I love, because they didn't all of a sudden say abandon the old building and then build a new one. You're actually still in there making the wine, and it's a nice testament to the building.
You just bring really good walking shoes, because it's
if I
old
have to
stone
be
steps.
perfectly honest, retrospectively, it would have been much cheaper for me to build a modern winery on the other side of the street and keep this for tourists.
Probably.
Well, there is that. It does still have that potential future.
It is quite an imposing edifice, as we'd say. Just for our listeners, the website is Cantine, Cantine with an E, Di Marzo, Marzo, like March, right?
Yes. .it.
Yeah, .it. Cantine Di Marzo .it.
Yep, and you can have it also in English.
Yeah.
Yes, it's got a great website, and it is in English as well.
Yeah, and you'll see some beautiful photos. Well, Ferranti, we know you're really busy, and we're so glad you joined us.
It's really nice having a chat rather than going through all this paperwork.
Oh, well, we're glad we're a highlight of your day.
We were thrilled to be able to visit your winery and spend time with Eleonora, who led us through the tasting and gave us the tour of the vineyards as well. And then also to be able to speak with you today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, and I hope you'll come and visit again. And then I hope I'll be available this time. And I'll show you around, and we can open a few bottles that are quite fun to try.
Oh, we'd love to do that.
That'll be fabulous. Okay. So we hope everybody is inspired to try the wines, visit the region of Irpinia. We're talking about Campania in southern Italy. We've kind of given you an idea of how to get there. It's easy and it's gorgeous. And always, as we close, we like to remind everybody that we enjoy traveling the world to share our findings with you. You can follow us at The Connected Table on Instagram and our website and blog, and follow all our shows on over 65 podcast channels and The Connected Table TV. And always stay insatiably curious.